Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's session, Carbon Neutral Travel and Events, Planning for a Greener Future. My name is Alyssa Peltier. I am Head of Market Strategy and Insights here at Cvent as part of our Cvent Consulting Division. And for the past year, I've really been intently focused on better understanding both our customers' needs and the major technology players in this rapidly emerging sustainability marketplace that we have that's supporting the meetings and events industry. And what's really certain as part of all of this research is that now and into the future, top enterprise organizations are going to need to re-architect their total event program, this total portfolio of events, for a more sustainable future. Or to put it more squarely, companies will need to be a lot more thoughtful about how they're investing or spending carbon and which events get prioritization based on those necessary outcomes of the program. Leading organizations in this space are starting to understand that with a smarter, data-driven approach, that they're able to position carbon neutrality as this primary driver, not a secondary driver or even a tertiary driver of their meetings and events and travel strategies, and to deliver results towards a corporation's larger sustainability objectives. I'm joined today by two leaders who are diving in headfirst to this sustainability events conversation. I will introduce them in just a few seconds, but I did want to call out for the majority of this webinar, we will be answering questions in the Q&A panel to the right in a written format. So you can expect those responses in real time in a written response format. So today I've got Brad Gillespie from Cvent and Andrew Carnegie from BP, who will be tackling some of these following topics as part of the discussion. We'll be talking about things like how we could start to translate those sustainability policies that you may have at your corporate level into mandates and actions for your meetings and events and travel program. What types of functions or even event types within our program deliver the largest carbon spend, if you will. How we might start to determine which of those programs need to even be reimagined, and how we might maintain the outcomes while we're reducing our carbon. So without further ado, I would love to bring our speakers to this virtual stage today. So Andrew, I'm going to start with you. Andrew Carnegie is the Global Procurement Manager at BP. Under this role, Andrew globally leads the BP Meetings and Events program as part of BP's Reinvention of the Workplace, focusing on how we share and collaborate with our audiences internally and also externally. Andrew's passion is for authentic engagement and equality within the voice of the attendee. Digital transformation, sustainability, and also supply chain agility is part of Andrew's everyday to create the ecosystem that we not only need for the now, but also for the future. Andrew also leads the BP procurement categories of spend for benefits and reward, and also for international mobility. Andrew is joining us from London today, so welcome to the virtual stage, Andrew.
Thanks very much, Alyssa. Nice to be here.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you for having us. Brad, so let's bring you onto the stage. Cvent Consulting's team works with select enterprise organizations to really modernize the event marketing and management operations through a strategic lens. This is done through strategy, planning, process design, evaluating different technologies and integration points, and of course, analytics. Brad previously served as the Vice President of Corporate and Enterprise Marketing, also at Cvent. Prior to that, Brad served as a CMO at Octave and Serious Decisions and has held leadership roles at Rolta and Zenet. We are here, guys. We're here to talk sustainability, and how fitting because we are virtual. So we're already limiting our carbon footprint in that regard, right? So let's get started with some questions. We'll hop right in here. I'd love to get the conversation going. So Andrew, I'm going to start the first question with you. I really want to focus a lot of today's conversation on really what BP is doing so that our audience can see themselves in what you've done as well. So I like to see that it's really no surprise that BP would have a comprehensive strategy, being that you are in the energy sector, and that vision to reach net zero. So can you highlight some of the aspects of BP's overall approach to sustainability, carbon reduction, carbon? How did you guys kind of get there from an organizational standpoint?
Yeah, sure. And again, thanks for having me today. So in 2020, so fairly recently, we went through a huge reinvention. Our new CEO decided with with the board and everybody behind him that we need a complete reinvention and a new purpose, new aims and ambitions to reinvent our company to make sure we're going to be profitable going forward, and to be here again sort of today, here tomorrow. And that very much focused on three really core aspects. One was resilient hydrocarbons, so kind of what we know in many ways. It was low carbon energy, where we're looking at sustainability, looking at renewables, looking at different things like that. And then we have convenience and mobility as well. So more our classic retail section, but also things of BP Pulse, EV charging, many things like that. But kind of core through all of that is sustainability. We have actually 20 key very detailed aims within sustainability that kind of underpin all of the things that we're going after and we're working on as a company. So with that frame, that's just sustainability frame and very clear purpose, aims and ambitions, we're all on very much putting our foot down on the accelerator to reinvent this company. We went through a huge restructure through 2020. We are now working in ways that we've never worked before, which is very exciting, but really delivering as well. Every week there's new partnerships, new things that are happening, and that then obviously comes down to how we work in myself in procurement, but also all across the business, whether you're in finance, whether you're in our people and culture business, which is HR, whether it's in customer and product, so many P&O, which is production operations, wherever you are, we have this kind of similar alignment, which is incredible, and we're very proud of where we've got to so far, but we've got a long way to go yet too.
You mentioned that, so I'm actually really curious, how did those organizational campaign objectives and goals then start to translate to your own departmental objectives, within the MICE and the travel space? How did you start to set those objectives for your own departments?
Yeah, it helps when there's a ton of detail, right, and a really lovely strategy already put in place as a top line, and you can start to sort of say, okay, right, where do we fit here? And that was incumbent on all of us, especially as category managers here in BP, in sort of classic procurement categories. We were targeted straight away with, okay, how do we do this? How do we obviously do all the good stuff that we've done before, which you call classic procurement on, cost, value driving, cost avoidance and things like that. But more so changing the face of procurement. And then that's trickled down from finance, and then finance procurement, and then certainly into my area of procurement, which is within digital and talent supply. So those goals became very linear, actually, slightly lesser, maybe less zeros behind it in terms of any financial aspect or numbers, but certainly very easy flow down. And then when it came to our own categories, we were very much not left to our own devices, but certainly given the oomph, the effort, and the freedom to go and see what we want to go after straight away, because not every category within procurement would need to maybe do that aspect there. They need to do this bit first, and then they come to this bit, or these aims and sustainability might need to come first rather than the other ones, or it might just not be quite appropriate. So we had that ability then to set out those goals and aims, and happy to say, meetings and events, we've got a very sort of clear view on that, because we are dealing with a kind of over the top aspect. We all know, and those people on the audience would know, that sort of travel, meetings, events is that extra thing. It's that discretionary spend, if we want to call it that, right? And hence sometimes there's a battle there of is it a cost or is it an investment? So we have to sort of think about those things. So it's quite a present and easy thing to identify when we're creating something outside of the norm. Therefore we can calculate that, we can capture that, we can influence that, and we can do things differently. So we've been able to set some goals around net zero. We've been able to sort of put tools into play, but not ever forgetting that meeting with events especially are another tool. It's another communication, another engagement opportunity. So to get that right and get that theory right behind that, and the science of why we were doing meetings and events, is probably as important in some ways as mitigating or preventing carbon, which on the scale of things, as the size of BP and many companies, is quite small. So we balance both of those things.
Brad, I know you're working with other customers. Can you see kind of synergies between how others are thinking about this too?
Yeah, and thanks, Alyssa and Andrew. Good to connect with you as well on this. So every organization, large, small, U.S. and abroad, has sustainability, somewhere in its top 2 or 3 corporate priorities these days. It's not a coincidence that we've got Andrew and BP on as a representative of one that's being very aggressive in most categories, as Andrew described, all the way into kind of the meetings, events, travel space. That said, as we look across the Cvent customer base, most of our customers are in the very, very early days of this. And just to level set expectations, this is while we're going to have and see goals and objectives with timelines attached to get to very measurable decreases in carbon in perhaps short periods of time. This is a long-term initiative that we need to start on today. And most of our customers are in the very, very early stages of that process. So I think as we go forward the next several quarters, we as Cvent and our team within Cvent, we're going to be talking a lot about how do organizations that are just getting started think about readiness? What can you be doing today to start that journey towards sustainability and ultimately net zero? So variety, wide range of organizations in various stages of maturity, but most are in the very, very early stages of this endeavor.
Yeah, and I think one of the reasons why I reached out to you, Andrew, was because of the perceived maturity of the BP organization on this narrative, and one particular facet of your organization that you have, or particularly that's supporting the MICE and travel programs, is this BP's Sustainability Plan and a calculator that's being used by your department too. So can you talk about how that came to be and kind of the evolution or the maturity that it took at BP's Meetings and Events program to get to that space?
Yep, sure. So we've had BP Target Neutral, and you can go and Google this and find out the calculator. It's free for everybody to use. We've actually had probably in some ways more usage outside of BP than internally, which is fantastic to hear. Agencies, technology firms, and all sorts of people have used the tool. So go and have a look at that. But BP Target Neutral has been around for a while. We wanted to start offsetting our air travel quite a long time ago. We felt that was quite a quick win. We've got the data, the to and fro countries, quite easy to put in, calculate and offset centrally quite quickly. Me waving the meeting and events flag, sometimes we get forgotten, don't we, to the big brother or big sister of travel. I want to do something differently, and it's not something you can calculate on the fly. It's not something you can put into a spreadsheet easily on a macro view and just say, yep, we've done that, that's good, let's move on to the next thing. Each meeting event is different. Each way we can set it up, we can influence something differently. The suppliers that we use for every different meeting event will be slightly different. Yes, we have some stalwarts. It'll be a technology firm or a venue firm or something like that, but generally speaking, we could hold go to one venue and hold 5 different events on 5 different days of the week, involving all different third parties or otherwise. So I sort of put my hand up and said that, can we offer something that's simple to use? Because if we don't put something out there, either somebody else will, or we're not going to have it maybe. And the view at the start was actually just to be for BP, right? And then we quickly realised actually this is just good stuff for everybody else. So that's how that came around. It kind of encapsulates the calculator part, which is kind of things you'd expect. What's your food you're using, sure, where people are traveling from, and again, that's some of the easy data if you can get hold of it early enough, and other things like that. But we realised also the toolkit, like the discussion points, the influential points on how we can influence people to do the right things before we get to that offset stage is as important, right? You want to reduce carbon first and then offset the bit at the end. And then that's what we got to. So that plan came around and thankfully had good support, launched it, and on off it goes. And again, it's been used probably more externally to the BP than internally, but good news is it is being used internally, has been well used, but probably more of say at this point on some of those larger programs. For the smaller things, it's that's what we're trying to sort of crack that nut now. Is it something we want to put a bronze, silver, gold package in together, which may just encapsulate everything rather than going down to every single line? Because the best will in the world, we're probably not going to catch those. So we have to sort of maybe think about that a little bit more.
Hedge your bets or try to prioritize
Something
at least
like
which
that.
programs are consuming the most, right? Interesting. So it does sound like, kind of first step for anybody who's new to this or kind of trying to figure out, okay, where do I even start? This seems like a monumental task for my organization. Maybe to understand current state of the program, whether that's one event, a series of events, or that total event program. And I know, Brad, that's a lot of the work that the Cvent consulting team does, is just trying to, one, get a view of what is the total event program. And so interesting here is to layer in that carbon expenditure on top of what that viewpoint is. I just wanted your commentary on that.
Yeah, sure. To understand where the opportunities are going to come from and the big opportunities to make a real impact, we need to understand what our starting point is. And so tools such as the one created by BP, which I'm not ashamed to say we're kind of borrowing from and gathering inspiration from, there's going to continue to be more and more tools, more and more sets of data. Our audience is probably already seeing and getting familiar with some of those. But it does come back to your view of your program, and you need to start there and get your arms around what you can see. The process of then understanding the carbon that is in that program are where tools such as these that Andrew mentioned, the BP have created, and others will continue to create, will really come into play. We mentioned, sustainability is this massive company-wide program for most of our organizations. There's only so many deep pockets of carbon expenditure relating to meetings, events, and travel where we're going to really have the impact. And one of the consistent things we see across companies where they're looking first is things like air travel. That is not to say that we're also not seeing really good, just practical use of just some common sense. Let's try to avoid the things that along the way to making big changes and real fundamental shifts in our programs that are going to take big chunks of carbon out of the program. Let's also start the process, start the behavior of looking for facilities that are leaning towards green and LEED certified and the like, and other ways that decisions you can make starting now will have a positive impact on the program. So it's going to be this mix of big initiatives, small initiatives, but your understanding of what your program consists of is going to be a great starting point that most, if not all, organizations can get started on right away.
That's a great segue to my next question here, because I'm very curious about the technology. Seeing that Cvent is hosting this experience, clearly we have vested interest in the technology space. So Andrew, I'm curious to hear how technology is aiding in these efforts, and specifically what role does Cvent play, because you are users of Cvent at the end of the day. So how is that data that Brad's talking about being pulled from technologies like Cvent and others to inform your strategy and supporting data decision making?
Yeah, I mean, data is probably the biggest key central piece to all of this, as it is to probably nearly every decision that we make right these days. And there's so much data. It's about making sure it's the right size, the appropriate amount. And again, data is only so far. You have to have the right analytics, the right trends. It's not just good to have tons and tons of rows of numbers. You've got to make sense of it. So absolutely having kind of your program in one place, your venue sourcing and other technology and other things, other aspects of events going through one place is key. You can't avoid that. You can ask, obviously, I think with technology such as yourselves and Cvent, you can adapt it to however you like in many ways. So you can ask certain questions through the process of getting to, before we ever get to the actual event happening.
Sure.
We can lead, we can influence, and I think, Brad, to your point, creating that culture is huge, right? And if you're constantly nudging people in the right direction, constant nudges, changing the tone, creating that culture. That's where you can do that in things like request forms, and then obviously if you get to website registration and mobile app, you're constantly pushing it there. So you're setting the tone. You're making sure that your attendees and your event planners before that are well known to all of the things that we're trying to do from a central point of view. So it becomes second nature then. And I think there's still a really great roadmap in front of you for Cvent. You know, I've been speaking to sort of your colleagues who work with us in BP and say, I think there's a fantastic opportunity. You've got loads more you can do. You know, setting the standard, making sure that we are all understanding of what venues can and can't do. You've got this great central pool of so many thousands and thousands of venues, for example. Like let's make sure we don't all go off and set standards from each different company, whether you're in BP or you're a different company in a different sector. Let's use a centralized standard view, and that will help us understand who we're going to RFP with, hopefully influencing before that who we're going to go to RFP for a venue. And then when we're choosing the venues, we can start to see which ones are getting business and why. And obviously there's still, you know, it'd be silly of me to say there isn't a sweet spot of service, location, cost, but of course now carbon and actually well-being as well, really, really important, is that they're now having a big factor into that as well. So if we can have nudge theory and going throughout throughout the whole process, and then of course when you get to there, you may want to use attendee hub as you guys have now, right, instead, or as side on for a particular group of people who can't travel, or actually say that, you know, that really is on the other side of the world. We're going to make sure this event you're not going to come, but we are going to open up attendee hub on this occasion. You know, there's a raft of different technologies that are going to enable you to set the tone again, create that culture, but then also calculate and data, and then, you know, onwards you go. Because I would like to say, you know, we haven't got it all figured out for sure, right? It's still early days. You know, it would be silly of us to say that we've got it all conquered, but we feel like we're on the right path. And then I think, you know, that even probably the end of this year, we're going to be able to, especially with the meeting events coming back, we're going to be able to review all of that and say, okay, yeah, we feel we've got a bit more data in the new world, especially as face-to-face is now predominantly being used, probably more than virtual again. Are we doing things right? What can we do with it? You know, how much have we really changed, and what can we do into next year?
I'll jump in. All good points that Andrew made. One in particular, I'll underscore: nobody has it all figured out. Unless somebody's listening that has this perfected, and then reach out to us. We want to see it.
Please do.
But obviously, working on a problem this large and ultimately solving it is going to take a lot of different technologies and systems. And Cvent's point of view is going to be, as your program system of record, we clearly have a role to play. But this is going to evolve over the years to come. And so we are listening intently to customers like Andrew and others to understand how we're adding value in the near term, but also what can we be thinking about. We won't get into listing out all of the possibilities for integrating with third-party data providers and other tools, but there's a bunch out there. There's a lot of investment that the marketplace is providing to tackle this problem. We're going to be monitoring that pretty closely, but it'll ultimately be a combination of things to solve this. And we clearly want to have a central role to play as the program system of record at Cvent.
That's a great add-on, Brad. I appreciate that. You know, Andrew, you're saying we're not that mature, but we are starting to inform our decision making. So I'm really curious to see if you've had to make any compromises in your programs to date, right? You know, how feasible really is it to maintain these outcomes while then also prioritizing carbon reduction targets? Because we know that travel is a massive expenditure, right? But there's a need to meet face to face. So I'm just curious if you've had to make any of those, you know, trade-offs or compromises, like I said.
I think it's a hard one. I think, you know, BP is such a, you know, large company, and we've got, you know, so many different areas of business that pop up with, you know, particular initiatives in one way. Sure. So they might end up, you know, swinging right to the face-to-face 100%, and then some maybe, you know, different categories of people that are being, you know, invited and attending. And then we're like, you know, I think there's quite a big playoff around just having contingency as COVID still is around here and there, or there's geopolitics that are,
Sure.
We don't want to go into it today. There's tons of reasons why people are not being able to travel. So sort of using that contingency of technology is really interesting. And then are you paying twice? Are you paying for a virtual event and a face-to-face event? And that sort of cost element is always that balance point. You've got to find that balance point. The offsetting itself is probably not the worry. I think there's some myths there with people. If you go and have a look, carbon is relatively cheap still, I'd say. So if you go and look at it, now it's not going to be tons and tons of money to offset your program, but it's I think in retrospect. But I think if you look at also the decisions you have to make, sometimes it's not always going to be easy, and sometimes you're going to have to do things maybe that didn't suit quite right, but you maybe play the long game. So I can't think of any sort of specific examples as such, but I think there's there's always a balance. The well-being aspect as well, as I mentioned, we're really trying to sort of get that sweet spot of well-being, cost, carbon, it's I think
and if nothing else, it's part of the decision-making process today, right? It's a factor, it's a consideration. Yeah,
exactly. Triaging it, that's one thing we're really trying to work on, is to create a new tool actually, which we're going to put in front of everything, where people can just triage their requirement. It's not such an approval tool. We're thinking it might lead to that. But if we can start triaging people's requirement on a standard view, it empowers those people, the event planners or the travelers. It empowers the line managers, the budget holders as well, to understand really, okay, they've said this, and this. I think we might be able to make some informed decisions to say, do you know what, we might just put a pin on that one at the moment, because the budget holders, the execs of the world, they want to see things at a macro view. If somebody waves their flag and say, yeah, we've got an event, I want to do this tomorrow and this is what we're going to do, it sounds great, but is it compared to this one and this one and this one? That's the real kick on it. So there's balance of a single program on its own, but then you have to look at all at mass, and that's again something we're trying to work hard at, because I think that's where you really get that vision of, okay, what's really important for the company.
What's future look like? What's future state look like? Brad, I'd love to pass the floor to you, because I know that this is a major objective of the Cvent Consulting division, is really looking at outcome management, if you will, new term here, and understanding that across the total event program, like we were talking about earlier. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Outcome management, expectations management is another key. We want our program leaders to be as proactive as they can in addressing this. If we wait for kind of a top-down policy to come around to this program, what we want to avoid and what we have to avoid is that simple lever of, let's just cut half the travel. That's how we'll get there. You won't be able to accomplish your program goals of getting people together if we just rely on some very, blunt objects. So thinking ahead and starting to think creatively about the makeup and structure of a program, to how do we facilitate getting people together in all the right places to accomplish the goals of the program, while also understanding the cost of carbon to do that, and creative ways to make both happen. Now, we're not there yet where you have everything you need to look at your program and see all of those trade-offs that can happen, but that's where we're going. We're going to a place where you're going to see opportunities perhaps to do perhaps more meetings that have less long haul travel to accomplish the same objectives of getting your teams together or getting your people in front of customers. And so thinking creatively as leaders, as opposed to just letting this be a math exercise, is going to be part of the challenge of this. And so we want to help leaders start to be ready, working in that direction, to have some of those conversations and be a part of the conversation in formulating this policy for your program, as opposed to just being on the receiving end of it.
That's great. That's great. Great thoughts there, Brad. So I know we're coming up on time. Andrew, Brad, I want to get some final thoughts. Andrew, I'll start with you. We've talked a lot about the fact that BP is clearly ahead of the game, although still feels like it has a lot more opportunity to grow, right? But for somebody starting out, who's just that doesn't have a calculator, that hasn't really gone through the goal setting process that BP has gone through. Are there any lessons that you guys have just in these early stages even that might benefit the audience that's trying to get this started?
Yeah, sure. So one, we did a calculator, it's out there, so feel free to use that. If you want to then spin off your own, that's fair enough. I think two, I think just if you think about it, it's like an enormous thing, right? It's not a small thing to go and tackle, but don't let that put you off. Marginal gains, I'm a big fan of marginal gains theory, and if you do your 1% across the board, you're going to make a sizable gain. So to do that, start baselining as soon as you can, and that's not an easy thing to just drop in and start doing. But if you can start calculating some of your carbon expenditure, and even just pick one category, so we're going to focus on this or subcategory, or we're going to start asking our key top 5 event agencies, for example, what they're doing in their own supply chains. Just start somewhere, pick off one thing, go for it from there, because that's what we found was really helpful. And then onwards from there, you can move. And for example, we didn't pick off diversity straight away, but now we're really looking at diversity spend in our supply chain for events, which there's tons of, by the way. What a diverse, fantastic industry we work in already. So that might be a quick win, but it really is, and we want to influence that to spend more with diverse suppliers. So sort of maybe start with a high level map, pick some targets and go after them. If you try and do all of them at once, you're going to blow your mind, I'd say. My last point, I guess, would be just industry sharing. I think we all need to be better at that. This is not sort of information that is going to make us jump ahead in points, right, on a FTSE index or otherwise. We need to share this stuff. This is good business for the world. So don't forget that, and happy to again engage as well, because we feel like we've got a long way to go, and keep learning, be humble with it, and I'm sure you'll do well.
Thank you for that. I love the notion of marginal gains. I think that we all could use that in our day-to-day, but certainly application to the sustainability narrative. Brad, how about you?
Well, I couldn't agree more with everything that Andrew laid out, and I think kind of very in line with that, this is a long game that we can start on today. We can start doing some things today without a strategy, without the data, that are just going to be the right behaviors and thinking about things. There's a lot to learn for many of us. We're not going to overnight become experts in this space, but we need to start learning. This is not something that's going to go away anytime soon. We need to deepen our understanding of this bigger problem, how it's going to relate to our programs, and be a little more conversant in the kind of the data of this conversation. Start today. Do some of those things that Andrew mentioned. Start baselining. If you haven't really gotten your arms around your program to understand kind of where the carbon could live, where it could be, start there. And start some of those kind of practical behaviors that are going to serve you well in the long term, that you could go ahead and start today in terms of some decisions that your teams could make right away.
Thanks, Brad. Thank you, Andrew. Thank you both for joining me today. I think this was a fantastic conversation, certainly to get us started. There's much more dialogue to be had. But once again, thank you all to the audience for joining us. And I very much appreciated the chat and the questions. Hopefully we got all of those answered. If not, we're going to continue to write out responses there. But as Brad said, I think as Andrew said, and I just said, the convo is just beginning. So we appreciate your engagement nonetheless. With that, I did want to call out, we do have some upcoming webinars, not related to this topic of sustainability, but those are going on throughout the month of August. Just kidding. There is one on sustainability. So we will be continuing that conversation on August 10th. But there are certainly some other topics that Cvent is bringing to market as well that we'd love to have you join us for. So mark your calendars, your diaries, if you're joining us from the UK. And also make sure to please take the survey, We Can't Get Better, and make sure that this content is resonating and tracking with you unless you take these types of surveys. So please, please, please give us your feedback. We'd love to hear from you. And with that, have a wonderful rest of your day. See you again.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks all.